There's a simple, comforting story about money that most people are taught. Long ago, humans struggled with barter. A farmer had grain but needed shoes. A shoemaker had shoes but wanted meat. Trade was awkward, inefficient, slow. So, the story goes, someone had a brilliant idea. Money. Coins appeared. Trade became easier. Civilization moved forward. It's clean, logical, comforting, and mostly wrong. Money didn't emerge because barter was inconvenient. Money emerged because power needed a tool. And once that tool existed, it never stopped shaping who controlled value, labor, and violence. Welcome to Economic Story, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Before money, most human societies didn't operate on barter at all. Inside small communities, people didn't constantly negotiate exchanges. They relied on memory, obligation, and trust. You gave because you belonged. You received because you were known. Debts weren't written down. They were remembered. Value wasn't abstract. It was social. This system worked remarkably well, as long as society stayed small. But scale changes everything. As populations grew, villages became cities. Trade expanded beyond kin and neighbors. Strangers arrived with unfamiliar customs and no shared history. Trust didn't scale. Memory broke down. Obligation faded. Violence increased. And rulers faced a problem barter could never solve. How do you feed an army that doesn't know you? How do you tax people you'll never meet? How do you extract value from a population spread across vast territory? That's where money enters the story. Not as convenience, but as infrastructure. For value to move across distance, it needed a body. Something durable, portable, divisible, countable without conversation, trustworthy without memory. Food would spoil. Livestock would wander. Land remained fixed. Labor disappeared the moment it was spent. Metal provided the solution. Copper, bronze, silver. Not because they gleamed, but because they held firm under strain. They did not decay. They could be melted and reformed. They could be divided with precision. They were scarce enough to hold worth, yet plentiful enough to move widely. Metal didn't only store value. It set value in motion. Yet it wasn't merchants who transformed metal into money. It was rulers. Early states in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Eastern Mediterranean didn't require money for trade. They required it to command. Armies do not fight on promises. Soldiers do not march on goodwill. They require payment. And payment must be uniform, recognizable, and enforceable. Once states began to demand taxes in metal, everything shifted. People who once lived outside markets were pulled into them. Subsistence turned into obligation. Harvests became debts. Markets did not arise naturally. They were summoned into being by taxation and power. Money did not free people from rulers. It made rulers far more effective. This is the piece textbooks often omit. Money was never neutral. It wasn't crafted to help equals exchange easily. It was designed to measure, extract, and redirect value at scale. Once value could be extracted, it could be stored. Once stored, it could be accumulated. Once accumulated, it could be turned into force. That is why early financial centers weren't marketplaces. They were temples, palaces. Accounting preceded coinage. Ledgers came before markets. The system was constructed top-down, not bottom-up. Then came the next advance. Stamped metal. When rulers marked coins with symbols, weights, and authority, they weren't simply standardizing trade. They were stamping trust itself. A coin declared, "You don't have to trust the person handing this to you. You only need to trust whoever placed their mark upon it." Authority replaced relationship. Coins carried the faces of gods, emperors, and emblems of power. Every transaction reinforced who ruled. Every payment reminded people whose system they lived within. And once rulers understood they controlled money, temptation followed. Metal content was lowered. Edges were trimmed. More coins were issued than reserves allowed. Spending grew easier. Consequences were postponed. Inflation wasn't discovered in modern times. It was invented the moment money became adjustable. Prices climbed. Trust frayed. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Yet the system persisted. Because once money existed, societies could not return. The tool was too powerful. And here is the insight that still holds true today. Money didn't evolve apart from power. It evolved alongside it. The materials changed. The incentives did not. We still use uniform units. We still rely on authority to define value. We still accept abstraction in place of trust. Money made power patient. And patience is a form of control. Kings fell. Empires crumbled. Borders shifted. But the logic of money endured. Value flows through authority. The jingle of money has left our pockets, but its DNA is still bronze and silver. Today we speak of liquidity, not debasement. Of balance sheets, not clipped coins. Of institutions, not emperors. The language has changed. The mechanism remains. Money is not evil. It is human. It was not built to be fair. It was built to scale. Fairness has always been negotiated after the fact. Through politics, through pressure, through struggle. Inflation, debt, and crises are not anomalies. They are features of a system designed to manage power at scale. To understand this is not to predict the future. It is to see the limits of the system you inhabit. Money can move value. It can store labor. It can coordinate massive systems. But it cannot guarantee fairness. It cannot replace judgment. From barter to bronze. From coins to digits. Money did not make life easier. It made power portable. And once power became portable, it reshaped everything. The most dangerous belief is not that money is corrupt. It is that money is neutral. History does not repeat. But the logic it runs on rarely changes. And once you see that logic clearly, you no longer ask why the system behaves the way it does. You begin to ask a better question. Where do I stand within it? If this story shifted your perspective, subscribe to Economic Story. Because history doesn't just explain the past. It exposes the systems shaping your present. See you in the next story.